part of this year talking more about the rest of the world and the church and the rest of the world and our relationship to it. So then, this week, well, you got to start somewhere, and so I thought, well, we got this story about the Magi, and so I guess we could probably just start with Iran, right? And so, since we're going to start with Iran, we might as well ask Ace. I mean, we could have asked Linda, because Linda's also spent time in Iran, but Ace has spent more.
No, Sue. Sue spent time in Iran.
Oh, wasn't it?
Sue,
Oh.
but it was Persia.
You could ask Linda, but she would send you to Sue.
Okay. Sue is not here, so that would not have been helpful. Well, there you go. See how they're... No. Right, so this is why I asked Ace, because I got it right the first time. Right? And then, this thing happened on Friday with the assassination/bombing, or whatever you want to call it. And we were all ready. The sermon was like half done already anyway. It was going to be about this. And I tell you this story to remind you that whatever is going to be happening in the next while, and there's going to be lots happening in the next while, and we are going to be involved, many of us, in much that is happening, and it's going to be frustrating and hard and tiring, and we don't know what it's going to be about. But we do know that the Spirit of God is going to be with us. That, like the Spirit that somehow got me on this Iran thing, 3 or 4 days before the bombing, is going to be the same Spirit that is going to be with us. I prefer to believe it that way. I could also say that, God arranged some bombs to be dropped just to help my sermon, but I'm hoping that's much less likely. So, yeah, and this passage, right, illustrates so well how very complicated and bizarre that all is. Because I would much have preferred if the Spirit instead had intervened and stopped the bombs from dropping. Just like Joseph would have much preferred if the angel of the Lord had gone to Herod and said, hey, not so much with the killing of the kids, okay? Right? Or if the angel of the Lord had appeared to the commander of the army and said, no, don't do this. But for some reason, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph and said, run away. And the angel of the Lord is probably not going to appear to us. But the Spirit remains among us. And one of the things we need to constantly be asking is, what is the Spirit nudging us to do? Because the Spirit is hopefully going to be doing lots of nudging over the next few months, just as the Spirit has been doing lots over the last few months, so there's no reason to think this is going to stop. And then the question is going to become, are we going to listen? Because my experience, at least of the Spirit, is that it's just little stuff. Stuff that suddenly becomes obvious or becomes clear, or you get this little internal push, and you can do what you want with it. You can say, no, I'm busy, because you are. I mean, we all know this. We're all busy. And the day is not going to suddenly magically get longer for us over the next few months. And the week is just going to be 7 days long, however many hours that we need to do things in. But what are we going to do when we're nudged? Matthew, in his story, generally assumes that rulers are going to do what rulers are going to do. And there's nothing you can do about it. That seems to be the general New Testament approach to how to deal with rulers. And the general response of the angel and the New Testament is, run away. That's what Joseph does. He gets told to run away. And when we get to the apocalypse part of the New Testament, that's generally the idea too. Run away. Flee to the hills. Something like that. And that's tempting. right? Especially as the lone Canadian here. Deb's already up there, I could just go join her. But it wouldn't change anything. I mean, even if we all decided to, you know, start a little commune up in the bush in Canada somewhere, which I wouldn't join you, honestly, but you know, you could do it. You know? I mean, it would deprive the U.S. government of a tiny little bit of income tax, but they wouldn't notice. And otherwise, right, running away just isn't going to solve this one, or anything for that matter. So I'm not going to run away, and neither should you. But it's tempting. It's worth understanding that it's tempting. But it's also worth understanding that the last two major wars that this country has gotten itself into, or at least, or two or three, have almost been stopped by people power. Right? That before the invasion of Iraq, it was very close. The power of people speaking for peace came very close, we now know, to stopping that one. And so we have a task that actually makes a difference. Because all of the noise coming out of Washington from both parties is that our voices don't matter. Right? You can have a protest, nobody listens. Right? You can say what you want, the government's just going to do what it wants. And the government wants you to believe that, because then they can do what they want. But we know from history that it matters. And people are also going to be protesting and have been protesting in Iran. And it has mattered. And one of the reasons that the Iranians are some of the leadership is probably looking forward to this war is to distract their people from legitimate concerns that they have with their own government. So they got two sides that are on the same path. It's also important to remember that this is not a partisan issue. While, yes, the Bushes started the Iraq War, right, Obama got us into Syria. Right, and the drums of war are going to be beating for both parties. And the people who make money off of all of this conflict are both Democrats and Republicans and independents and everything else in between. And it is our current president who campaigned on the promise to get us out of these endless wars. He was the one who said that most clearly in the last election. We need to hold him to that promise. So we need to think about what it is we need to do to be effective. And this is not, by the way, a traditional either Brethren or Mennonite approach to things. That traditionally both groups have said that our job is to be faithful, not effective. Right? That this is traditionally a Mennonite approach to things. Linda doesn't agree with me. Right? See, that's also a Mennonite approach to things. We don't agree with each other. Right? But traditionally, I grew up being told that our job is to, just be as faithful as we can be, and, if it isn't effective, well, so be it. We were faithful. Which meant we've done a lot of foolishly ineffective things. Now, we've also done a lot of foolishly effective things, and that's a lot of things to be said for doing things that are foolishly effective. But I still think there's something to be said for actually doing things that work. Part of what we need to do, of course, is to continue to humanize the Iranian people, which is why Ace's story was so wonderful about just kids in Iran. And I've posted some things on my Facebook page about just regular folks in Iran. And hopefully we can also find ways of reaching out to the Iranian people in Morgantown and area. And if you don't know any, we can find you some. Linda, you've got Iranian friends, right, in town? See, I knew there was something about Linda in Iran. I was half right. And we also need to make some noise so that the people in Iran know that we're people too. because all they see is drones and bombs and soldiers. And they need to hear our voices. As I was preparing this, it wasn't feeling much like a sermon. But as I was thinking about that, it doesn't need to be much like a sermon. It needs to be about this book and the world around us. And hopefully we manage that. And so we need then also to remember that while the Spirit is going to be working among us, and we as individuals are going to be doing things, we as a community will be supporting one another. And we will be supporting anybody that walks in these doors. And we will be part of a larger community. So we want to go now to communion to, in a small way, symbolize that. That the communion table is open. It's more than just open, it's invitational. That if you're not sure that you're invited, the answer is yes, you're invited. In fact, right, we should, in a perfect world, be going out to the streets and dragging anybody in who wants to come. It's a little, probably aren't many people out in the streets right now. It's a bit cold out there. But that's the idea. We want to do that in our piecework, and in our regular work, and in our church work. It's all the same work. So I invite you to come forward now and join me for a little bread